Hey there, my name is Chanel. If you don't know me, I'm the designer behind CV Fiberworks, and welcome to my channel. This is the start of a new series, episode 1 of a Design With Me series that I'm going to be doing multiple videos on picking a project, coming up with a plan, start to finish, all the way through to publishing the design. And part of this is to not only show how I personally design, but to give you an idea of the kinds of processes that go into pattern writing and give you the confidence if you want to try writing your own patterns. So for the purposes of this video, we are going to go over planning stages. I've actually already picked the project. I polled my Instagram audience, and the one that won was a frilled lizard. So a little bit challenging to start with, mostly because I seem to always make life harder on myself. But I'm super excited to dive into this project, and I'm going to go step by step on how I would go from concept all the way through to finished final design. So to get started, let's talk about reference photos and getting colors picked, getting kind of a positioning, sort of a general concept design drawn up. I'm going to switch so that you're looking at my sketchbook, and we're going to get started. Step 1, first and foremost, we are going to look at images on Google of a frilled lizard. I have some up on the screen right now. And you want to get pictures generally of like the whole body, different positioning. These lizards actually look really funny when they run. They stand up on their back legs with their front legs kind of hanging like little T-Rex arms. They have very long necks. Like you wouldn't notice, but when that like skin flap kind of folds back, like their necks are very, very long. So you want to try and get as many reference photos as possible, not only for color choices, but also just the general shape of the body. So based on these photos, I'm doing a simple sketch right here. And if you're trying to plan out a design and you can't draw, you can also pull these reference photos and mess with them in Canva or Procreate or even Photoshop if you have access to something like that. And you can kind of decide what sort of style you want your project to be in. Generally, you'll want to simplify shapes. Now, if you're wanting to make a really like complex, detailed project, that is not going to be the focus of this video, mostly because we are going to do a relatively simple design. Throughout this series, we're going to go from planning stages all the way through to publishing a pattern. So that we're not here for, a year, we're going to keep this design fairly simple as we can make it, but we are going to add a couple of little tricks and things that I think will really make this pattern stand out. As a quick aside, I am drawing my little frilled lizard in the style that I typically work in, where the head shape is very rounded, very simple. The body shape, I'm actually kind of using a similar body shape I did with Pascal the pangolin, where the body, in this case, the head, neck, body, and tail will all be one piece. In Pascal's pattern, it's just the body and the tail. But depending on your personal style, if you want to go for something that's a little bit more cutesy, I would enlarge the head or make some features really exaggerated. Basically, you can create the same animal in all sorts of styles. There are designers who make their animals look more like caricatures, like Crochet Me Zaddy has a similar body shape for all of his projects, and they're all sort of in like a teddy bear style, where they're standing up, with two legs and two arms, and he kind of alters the head shape and like that to modify the animal, and that is something you could definitely do here. One of the big deciding factors is complexity. Like I said, we're not making this terribly complex with the design that I'm going for, but if you wanted, you could actually simplify this pattern further. Either way, I recommend spending quite a bit of time here in this planning step. Draw a couple different versions or mess around on a photo editor app where you can make sure that you really like the positioning, the shape, the style, everything that you are kind of bringing to life on the page. So, because really this initial step is going to give you all of the blueprints to turn this into an actual pattern. So, like I said, take your time, mess around with shaping and just kind of see what you can do. And the more that you design, the easier it will be to come up with shapes that you're familiar with and that you know how to crochet without doing a lot of testing. This body shape, I'm pretty confident that I can do. Now, I will be putting wire into my project, and I'll get more into that in another video in the series, but there's kind of my idea. So, I mean, I would have one main line of wire running from the head all the way through to the tail, and then my idea to make that neck frill pop out would be almost like spokes of an umbrella, where they would pop out and kind of, you'd be able to bend them forward to have it in the like expanded or upright position, or you could bend them down against the neck. So it's kind of my mediocre little drawing here of how I'm thinking about putting the wire in. That will be a whole separate video, is kind of planning that out a little bit. But these are things to think about as you are trying to plan out your design. Internal structures, whether you want something to be weighted. I recommend writing notes next to your little sketches. Any sort of ideas that you have. It'll all be helpful when you go to start making the actual pattern, and you don't have to stick with these ideas, like they're not concrete. You may decide halfway through making a project that something else is working out better and try it a different way. But keep an open mind, write yourself lots of notes, any ideas that you have. I would put them all on one piece of paper so it's easy to reference. I've decided I think I'm going to go with the open mouth style because I think I like that better, and I'm just going to work on sketching possibly an upright position one to see how I like that. Okay, so I realized after I filmed this that you can't really see the upright drawing very well, but needless to say, I actually really like the upright position. I think that would be cool. And one of the interesting things is that if I use wire running through the center of the body, really if you change the positioning of the legs from directly underneath the body to a little further down, like he's standing, you could use the same exact design with two different positions. And like I said, I'll get more into that once we get into the actual pattern writing part, because it's probably easier to show you than it is to draw on a page. But keep in mind different positionings, and if you really want your pattern to stand out, try and pick a position that isn't typically seen, like in this case where he is standing upright instead of on all fours. Once you have a general idea of what your design is going to look like, it's time for step 2, which is picking colors. Now, I highly recommend, like I said, drawing or using some kind of photo app where you can mess around with different colors and kind of experiment with the palette that you want. Now, if you're going for something kind of realistic, depending on what reference photos you're looking at, they can be, this lizard is like browns, reds, I even saw one that was black and yellow. I am kind of thinking of doing non-traditional colors. So my original idea was kind of a blue and orange ombre. I really want to pick colors from my stash. I'm trying not to buy yarn at the moment. And I do have an excess of blue yarn and orange yarn. However, I'll skip ahead on my little sketching process to where I did color in one of the frilled lizards blue and orange, and I really just did not like the way it looked. It wasn't at all what I thought it was going to look like, and that's why it's important to take this step and kind of mess around with colors, because you don't want to have to frog something halfway through when you realize the colors are just not working out the way you want. So like I said, something about this just wasn't feeling right, so I tried a couple different combinations until I finally landed on this one in the top left. Granted, I still haven't fully decided which position I'm going to go for, as far as like whether I want him standing upright or on all fours, but I really like the color palette of the green, brown, yellow version that I did. So with this kind of color palette in mind, I've pulled some yarn off my stash that I think will match fairly well. When you're picking colors for your project, not only do you want to pick colors that go well together and kind of fit the theme that you're going for, but you also have to keep in mind how you're sourcing your yarn. Are you going to be working purely from your stash, or will you be buying yarn? Are you going to be limited in the kind of colors that you're using? And what kind of fiber are you using? I'm going to be using Wool of the Andes worsted. That's my go-to yarn from We Crochet. However, if you are going to be using a different kind of yarn, something that is meant to be played with and roughed up, are you going to be using acrylic? There's a lot more color options with acrylic. Just all these kind of factors to consider. So be very careful and be very mindful of what kind of yarn you're going to be using for your project, and take a lot of time to plan everything out before you get started. It'll make the process so much easier. So I hope you've enjoyed this first episode of my Design With Me series. Give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode.